Talk now to our correspondent in London, Simon Pusey. He joins me from Green Park in London. Morning to you, Simon. This is both a logistic, but more importantly, security nightmare. Preparing for all these visiting dignitaries, while at the same time allowing the people to have a taste of this final farewell. What's it like?
Yeah, good morning, Laddie, here from Green Park, which is just to my left here. This is where lots of people have come to try and watch the funeral. It's a big viewing gallery here, but it's been full up for many hours now. And as you say, the security here is unprecedented. The Met Police Force say they've never seen anything like this in their history, and I don't think Britain really has seen anything like this before. It far surpasses the 2012 Olympics here, mainly because no one really knows what's going to happen with the Olympics. People knew which venues people would be going to at what times, but here you've just got millions of people converging in London. You've also got 500 heads of state, kings, queens, princes and prime ministers and presidents from around the world, all converging in London, all with massive security details. One thing that is a little bit different than usual when you have a state visit is that most leaders have their own security, have their own cars, have big convoys. This year, here today, they're going to have to all board buses and coaches, which a lot of presidents and prime ministers have been a bit unhappy about. Apart from one, that is Joe Biden. He's got the beast. He'll be travelling with his own security convoy. But yeah, 10,000 police officers in London. Lots of forces from across the country have been adding their officers to help. They're checking manhole covers. Every single manhole cover in Westminster is being checked for bombs and explosives. Every single lamppost, and you've got lots of marksmen on the roofs of London. So it's a huge operation here. We've got behind me a lot of marshals who are here voluntarily, unpaid, have come out to help out as well, just to try and shepherd these huge crowds, which are expected to be several million in strength. So absolutely massive, and so far seems to be going smoothly. We're an hour and a half away from the service itself, but the numbers keep growing. The stream of people keeps coming through. They're all being shepherded to Hyde Park, but yeah, we haven't seen anything like this in the country's history, I think, in terms of a security operation.
Now, you talked about those 500 top dignitaries, princes, queens, prime ministers, presidents, and all that. Now, there's been quite a lot of buzz about who is in and who's out. In fact, just yesterday night, I was reading someone who said that is the hottest ticket on planet Earth at this time. You know, if you're there, then you're in. If you're not there, then you're out. So who's in, who's out? Do we know?
Yeah, we do. I mean, it's very rare that you get this many huge number of VIP people coming to one single event. I think the ones who are out can be fairly obvious. Vladimir Putin has not been invited. There was a little bit of controversy when the Saudi Prince bin Salman was invited. He's not attending, though. A lot of controversy around him and human rights issues. Also a bit of controversy.
Well, we seem to have lost Simon there. If we get him back, then he'll conclude what we were hoping would be a very detailed list of who's in and who's out. But safe to say, at this point in time, quite a lot of people are in, including Nigeria's own Vice President Yemi Osinbajo, as well as a number of others. The French President Emmanuel Macron. Foreign Desk has put together a report on those that we know, at least as at a couple of hours ago, are in. Please listen.
As leaders arrived in the country on Sunday, many also made their way to Westminster Hall to pay their respects to the Queen. US President Joe Biden, alongside First Lady Jill Biden, took their place on the balcony, making the sign of the cross before briefly placing a hand on his heart. The couple was accompanied by the US Ambassador to the UK, Jane Harden. Brazilian President Jair Bolsonaro, South African President Cyril Ramaphosa, and Cyprus President Nikos Anastasiadis paid their respects to the late Queen. Chinese Vice President Wang Qishan and members of the Chinese delegation view the coffin of the Queen. Mr. Wang will also be attending the Queen's funeral at the invitation of the British government according to the Foreign Ministry. Ukraine's First Lady Olena Zelensky and the Kings of Spain and Sweden also visited Westminster Hall to pay their respects to the late Queen. Even the French President Emmanuel Macron, alongside his wife Brigitte. Nigeria's Vice President Yemi Osinbajo described the late Queen Elizabeth II as a monarch for all seasons who brought people together from all over the world. After paying their respects, leaders began arriving at Buckingham Palace for a reception ahead of the funeral, with King Charles III as their host. Presidents, prime ministers, kings, queens, and sultans representing nearly 200 countries and territories are expected at the funeral on Monday. Meanwhile, King Charles also received leaders from the realms. Prime ministers from Tuvalu, Antigua and Barbuda, and Papua New Guinea were among those to meet the king in the 1844 room of Buckingham Palace. As monarch, the king is now head of 15 states, though he wields little constitutional power or influence. Tens of thousands of police officers and military personnel will be taking part in the state funeral on Monday, September 19, in what will be one of the biggest security operations the country has ever seen. The Queen's funeral is expected to attract hundreds of thousands of people to London streets, echoing other important events in Britain's history, including her coronation in 1953, the funeral of former Prime Minister Winston Churchill in 1965, and the death of Princess Diana in 1997. And as the countdown begins at 6:30 a.m. of Monday, the end of the line in state for the Queen, it seems the whole world is still waiting in line to catch a last glimpse of the longest reigning monarch of the British Empire.
Let's leave the Queen, shall we, for a moment, although we do have a special program coming up at the top of the hour of 10 o'clock, both from our Lagos and our London studios. We want you to join us for that. We've got full coverage of the funeral and, of course, of all the activities surrounding it. What you're watching on your screen now is a group of Sri Lankans freed from custody in Russian-held East Ukraine who have been telling of their months spent in captivity, which included beatings and privations. Police officials said the group had arrived in Ukraine to work and to study in Kupiansk just 3 weeks before the Russian invasion on February the 24th. The group tried to flee Kupiansk after Russian forces conquered the town on February the 27th, but were detained at the Russian checkpoint and driven to Vovshank. There, the 7-strong group say they were imprisoned in a factory compound, beaten, fed a little, and given restricted access to toilets or washing facilities, and asked to pay a ransom for their freedom. They say 6 men were held in one room together, and the only woman was locked away on her own. Sergei Boldenov, the regional police chief, said the group walked away from Vovshank to safety at a hotel after Ukrainian soldiers freed them from their cells. There, a security guard took the group in and informed the local police, who are now housing the group while they testify about the treatment at the hands of Russian forces.
In the work in the road captured for us. After close the cover, ice the close cover, and hand tied. After go the machine, first go one jail. After 2 weeks go another factory jail, and all of us cover the faces. After go jail, after remove the clothes. After we in the jail in 3 months. Every day patient looks at toilet 1 minute.
One time a day?
1 minute, 1 minute, 2 minutes.
One time a day?
One time 2 minutes. 2 minutes. 5 days after shower. Bath shower. 2 minutes. 1 person. 1 person. Bath.
And every day toilet cleaning.
Yes.
You?
Yeah.
My friend, we are all change toilet cleaning.
Food?
Food is little bit food, little bit macaroni, 2 breads.
Meanwhile, a group of human rights defenders has issued an appeal to the Russian Prosecutor General to investigate reports of prisoners being sent to war in Ukraine. The activists stated in a letter addressed to the Russian Prosecutor General that, quote, information was widely disseminated on Russian television and throughout Russia that there are thousands of prisoners with unserved terms for committing various, including serious crimes, who have been sent to Ukraine to participate in the special military operation. The appeal also stated that prisoners should only be released before finishing their sentences under certain terms: a pardon from the president, amnesty from the State Duma, or parole by a court decision. The activists who signed the appeal are associated with the Human Rights Council of St. Petersburg, a Russian NGO which monitors human rights violations. All right, I understand that we can conclude our conversation with Simon, who's still in Green Park in London, about the Queen's funeral. Simon, you were talking about who's in and who's out, and you were on the Saudi Crown Prince. So who else do we know is in at the moment?
Yeah, so Jair Bolsonaro, he's in the middle of a presidential campaign. In 2 weeks' time, the election's going to take place in Brazil, but he's here, and pretty much anyone who's anyone is here. You've got Emmanuel Macron and his wife, you've got Ursula von der Leyen, a lot of EU delegates have come as well, and you've pretty much everyone from around the world. Japanese president's here, and then you've got also, as you said, the Nigerian vice president is here, but pretty much anyone and everyone from the world of politics is here. A lot of people who have been knighted or given various honours by the Queen over the years, they'll be in attendance as well. Obviously, the devolved nations of the UK, so Scotland, Wales, Northern Ireland, all the government ministers from there will be here, and it's a huge security operation, as we said earlier, and it's really the fact that all of these people from around the world are coming is just really shows the status of the level of respect that the Queen has across the world. One of the first to arrive was the Australian Prime Minister, who came with quite a few people from the countries around Australia on the same flight, and it just really shows the kind of levels of respect that the Queen has had around the world, that all of these people have come in from the likes of Canada and Australia and America, but right around the globe. The ones that are missing are obviously Vladimir Putin of Russia and Prince bin Salman. The Myanmar military rulers have not been invited, so people who don't have the same diplomatic relations with the UK as maybe the friendlier states for the UK, such as America, France and Germany. Angela Merkel's here. Pretty much anyone and everyone, even people who have recently left their posts, but they had a relationship with the Queen like Angela Merkel did, have been invited. So it's unprecedented to have all of these people in one room, and it's a really big security operation, as we were describing earlier, and one that so far seems to be going smoothly. We're about an hour and 20 minutes away now from the funeral. Liz Truss, the Prime Minister here, has been meeting with quite a few of these presidents and prime ministers. Jacinda Ardern was there earlier this morning. But yeah, huge security operation, the likes of which we've never seen before. And like you say, so many VIPs, presidents and prime ministers. It really is unprecedented to have them all in one room at the same time.
All right, Simon, I must ask you, even though I understand that we do have live pictures of the preparations, so we'll be putting that on for our viewers, even as I ask you this. One group of people, there you go, those are the visuals from, I believe this is Westminster Abbey itself, which will be the venue for the funeral later on, as Simon was pointing out. But Simon, I must ask you about the presence of the media itself. I mean, you're there, but the world's media is also in London, and in spite of this security operation, they're trying to do their jobs just like you are and we are. How's that coming along?
Yeah, I mean, the royalty here, it's interesting being a British citizen. We don't really see it through the eyes of many other countries around the world, specifically America, really. It's a republic, of course, but they have a real fondness for our royalty, and especially the Queen. And I think you can also separate the Queen maybe from the other members of the royal family in terms of the amount of respect she's given. But yeah, the media have descended on this city like never before, and surrounding Buckingham Palace, you've got about 30 or 40 tents of all the big channels from around the world that have come. China is massively interested as well in the Queen. She had a relatively good relationship with Xi Jinping, who was given a state visit a couple of years ago. So it's just a massive operation, and I think for many members of the media, this is such a big story. This is the kind of thing that you want to be covering because it's a once-in-a-lifetime thing. It's been 70 years that she's reigned for, and you know, we've been knowing that this, obviously the Queen could pass away at any point for several decades now. The security operation in Whitehall here, they've been planning it for decades because it's so big. And I think so in terms of the media, I think everyone really wants to be covering this story. This is the only story in town, here in this country at least, and has been for the last 10 days since she sadly passed away. So yeah, huge levels of interest, and I'm not sure we're going to see a televised event that has more viewers than this one ever before. So that remains to be seen, but I think you're going to get a lot of people watching that funeral live there in Westminster, at Westminster Cathedral.
Indeed, Simon, I want to thank you, and I want to say that you're very lucky to be there in the midst of all this history, as you pointed out. But thank you. We will be coming back to you, of course, at the top of the next hour in the special program that we have on the Queen's, the coverage of the Queen's funeral starting at 10 o'clock here in Nigeria. And then, of course, from our London studios, where Juliana and then yourself in the field will be providing coverage of that event at Westminster Abbey. But for now, thank you, Simon. Thank you for being with us. Yes, I understand we still have more visuals from the live visuals. Exactly, there we go. As Westminster Abbey, the dignitaries making their presence felt, arriving there at Westminster Abbey. This has to go like clockwork because, as Simon was pointing out, there's so many people, so many important people who would want to be in that hall. And as we've heard, the hall, Westminster Abbey, can sit 2,200 people. 500 of the seats are already quite reserved. That's talking about the foreign dignitaries expected. The other 1,700 will be all kinds of important people in the United Kingdom itself, in Wales, in Northern Ireland, in Scotland, and in England. Relatives of the Queen, people occupying political and social offices, all of them wanting to be part of this momentous event, and we'll be keeping an eye on that round-the-clock coverage over the next 2 hours from the various points in the United Kingdom. Will start at the top of the hour. But for now, those are the live pictures that you're seeing, the preparations themselves of the members of the armed forces who will also be participating in this, the live pictures from London. But still to come on the program, Baker pays tribute to Queen Elizabeth with inscription on sourdough bread. Please stay on with us. All right, the visuals there of members of the armed forces we saw earlier on before the break. These visuals, of course, are live from central London. The troops themselves, various of the British Armed Forces now making their way down as part of this final farewell to Queen Elizabeth II, who will be having a funeral service in just over an hour from now at Westminster Abbey. Already we saw that the guests were already beginning to be seated at Westminster Abbey. That service is due to start at 11 o'clock Nigerian time and go on for thereabouts an hour. But this is part of what is going to be going on outside in the lead up to that as we've been reporting earlier in the day. We're going to have coverage of that special program coming up at the top of the hour. Amarachi Ubani and Juliana Olainka will be joining us both from Lagos and from London on that special coverage about the Queen's funeral. But back here in the studio, even in the midst of everything that is happening, business still goes on. And in that wrap, Ini John McQuarrie joins me here. Ini, the Queen? Yeah. Yes, the Queen has been buried, and possibly virtually everyone who's anyone is there.
Yes, all eyes are there.
All eyes are there, but business is still happening.
Business is still on. I mean, even that is business. I was speaking to Juliana last week. You know, some of the people who are there, who've been on the queue waiting to see, you know, the Queen, they also have to eat, they have to munch, they have to drink. So you have small businesses also benefiting from that along the way. So it's all business all through. All the travels, those are, they had to make extra trains available for the people going on there, and flights and all of that. So it's business everywhere.
Now, while all that was going on, Russia's central bank cut its key interest rate by 50 basis points.
Yeah.
Was this expected?
Yes, this was expected. This was expected because, you know, we've been talking about how Russia is trying to reduce the strength of its ruble because its products have become too expensive.
Absolutely.
So they're trying to make it cheaper to attract exports, you know, into the country and bring in revenue apart from their oil and gas. Then the other side of it is that we know that their export has also reduced, so they now have excess, for instance, agricultural goods and some of those things that used to serve as raw materials, even to the corporates that were operating there.
You're right.
So now the country seems to have a whole lot of products and demand is not growing that much. So one of the reasons they are doing this, apart from reducing the power of the ruble, is to make borrowing. You know, we talked about their mortgages, how a high percentage of Russians have not been able to pay their mortgage.
Right.
You know, because if you increase interest rate, it becomes even more expensive. So they are reducing it to make it cheaper for people to be able to access fund, to make it cheaper for people to be able, when they can access fund, then they can increase the demand of products that is in the domestic economy.
Since they are not allowed to talk about the outside economy.
Talk about the outside economy. So this is all part of what they're trying to do to stabilize. And remember, immediately after the war, then they had their interest rate to 20%, you know. So it's still a way of trying to balance it and get an equilibrium, as economists will say, you know, to help the economy.
Now, there's a crypto ruble. I'm still trying to get my tongue and mouth around that. The crypto ruble.
Yes.
What's that about?
Okay, so CBDC, central bank digital currency, is by the government, the Russian government, trying to use that to circumvent the sanctions so they can deal with other countries cross-border. That's by the government. But remember, they said they're not going to make it available to individuals. It's only the government that wants to use it. So you now have this crypto ruble. Is another initiative. It's like digital ruble, but on the platform of Ethereum blockchain. So now individuals are supposed to be able to use this to do cross-border transactions and payments without reverting to dollar or anything like that.
And therefore being able to bypass SWIFT.
Yeah, exactly, yes. And then also they're trying to spread the use of the MIR cards. You know, because you don't have MasterCard and all of that operating with them. So they're also trying to spread that. So it's all in a bid to go through the sanctions or, you know, escape the sanctions and put payment systems in place.
Now, let me ask you this. This one is a case of too much, too bad. There are farmers in Europe now who are complaining because Europe has gone out of its way, bent over backwards to help Ukraine, and particularly in agriculture. And now the Ukrainian goods flowing into Europe are much cheaper than the goods in Europe. So there's complaints.
Yes, so countries like Poland that have been of great help to Ukraine, the farmers there are now suffering because, you remember, they removed all the tariff to encourage trade from Ukraine. So what has happened is wheat that's about $324 in other European countries. When it comes from Ukraine, because all of that is about 200, maybe 250, 270, so it's now cheaper. Of course, as a consumer, you want to go for the cheaper one.
You are not being sentimental about this.
You are just being
You just want to buy.
You just want to be reasonable, you know. And so what happens now is that the farmers in those European countries do not have sales anymore. So I think it's going to be one hard decision for the government.
Yeah.
Do you want to help Ukraine?
Continue to help Ukraine, or do you want
to help your people? Because eventually what's going to happen is going to affect your revenue, your GDP, is going to affect the means of livelihood of those farmers. And then what are you going to do about it while you're busy helping Ukraine?
Well, I'm sure they'll all get back to it after today's momentous events.
Yes, I think today is for the Queen.
For the Queen.
I mean, even Business Morning has given way for the Queen.
Queen, indeed, yes. Speaking of which, right after this, instead of Ini and her crew being on Business Morning, we will have that special program,
yes.
Which talks about, which is going to focus on the Queen's final funeral service taking place in London. Thank you, Ini.
Thank you for having me.
And just before we go, staying with the Queen, since her death, a local baker has made with tributes to the Queen and the new King, King Charles III. Rex Artisan Bakeries in Little Chalfont, which is her store near Windsor Castle, makes bread with the messages, "Rest in peace, Your Majesty," and then King Charles III and Long Live the King stenciled on the loaves. The organic bread is made in an award-winning family-run bakery, and the baker says that although the big loaves can be ordered, they were mainly made for decorating the shops. Customer Samantha Cole thinks it's a, quote, nice tribute to the Queen, who will be buried in Windsor Castle later on today.
I make another one.
And so the start of the final farewells to Queen Elizabeth II, which kicks off at Westminster Abbey in just over an hour. And now, as we've been reporting, we'll have live coverage of that. Amrat Shubani and Juliana Lainka will be doing us the honors of that with Simon Pusey on ground in the field. Do watch out for that. That's coming up in a couple of minutes. But for now, my name is Ladi Akiri Duluale. To have yourselves a good morning viewing what we are viewing.